right now, if you just think about the news cycle and the way in which fear is promoted in society, it's actually really difficult to be free from fear. It's almost as though media are constantly fanning the flames of fear. Hi, my name's Andy, and welcome to Headspace. No, not really. Actually, if you use the app, you're probably not used to seeing me because they keep me locked in a very dark studio. After 7 years, they let me out. And the more I thought about how I wanted to spend my time, the more I thought about how nice it would be to maybe go on a bit of a journey together. The techniques of meditation are just one small part of how to live a healthier and happier life. I feel I can share it in a very different way out here than I can when I'm sitting in the studio. And that's it, really. So, shall we go? When I think of examples, times in my life where I felt afraid, I'm almost spoilt for choice. Whether I think about situations that I've been, or that impact myself as an individual, or that impact my family or friends, whether it's even bigger things, whether it's global things. I think we all experience fear in so many different forms. Soon after coming or moving out to America, I got really unwell with cancer. And I think for me, that provides a really helpful framework for how we experience fear and how we can use fear. So at first, I didn't really know kind of how bad it was going to be. I'd never thought about cancer. I wasn't someone who sat at home and worried about my health or my illness. And there were no sort of real signals kind of leading up to it. So it was a real sort of shock. And in those sort of few days and then the following kind of weeks and months, there was definitely some fear. I think you sit in front of a doctor and they tell you sort of, look, you may not be able to have children. You don't know how bad this is. It may have spread. You're going to need operations. You're going to need chemotherapy. I think it's very, very difficult to not experience fear. I personally wouldn't even want to not experience fear in that situation. I feel like fear is the appropriate response. So if our physical well-being, if our emotional well-being is under threat in some way, that's a signal. And sometimes we kind of need to listen to that. Had I not listened to it, I wouldn't have even gone to the doctors in the first place. So again, fear can be really, really helpful. But once I had the information, there was a choice. And there's a lot of uncertainty with cancer, with any kind of physical kind of illness. The doctor didn't have the answers. I didn't have the answers. And I could have either listened to some of the worst case scenarios that he was playing out. I could have taken those home and spent countless hours thinking about them and allowing that to sort of become the story. Or I could have listened to sort of some of the best case scenarios and played that out and not paid enough attention to my health. Or I could have just ignored the whole thing, pushed them away somewhere and not thought about them. I think the training in mindfulness for me, what it showed me was that there was the possibility to create a space where all of this stuff was welcome, where none of it was rejected, where none of it was encouraged, but where I could experience those things. And some days that meant sitting down and tears would come. And of course, they were tears of fear, of sadness, anxiety, so many different things kind of wrapped up in it. On other days, I'd sit down and actually I felt very happy. Couldn't really say why. Didn't have a lot of reason to be happy at the time, but for some reason I was. And sitting down and watching those changing emotions day after day showed me that fear isn't something that is permanent. It's not something that's kind of locked in. It's something that tends to sort of come and go. But that's not usually how we think about it. It's almost as though we have an idea of fear and we kind of go back to it and we remind ourselves of what it feels like. And because of that, every time we go there in our mind, and because we always find it, because we are looking for it, we have a sense that fear is kind of ever present. So for me, during that period of time, it really allowed me to sort of train in that art, if you like, of being present and then not getting swept away and not resisting. I'm not sure this place is so scary, actually. When they say it is, it's kind of magical. That makes you wonder how much fear comes from inside our own mind and how much of it is projected onto us from elsewhere. It's also like a scene out of Alfred Hitchcock right now, and the birds might attack at any moment. I think a lot about that with just the environment, society we live in at the moment. You know, I feel like places build up their own kind of energy. So if I think about places that I really love the feeling of when I walk into, typically they're places that, you know, people have gone to and expressed good feelings. They've gone to, there's a sense of reverence to them. So if you walk into any sort of, doesn't matter whether it's a temple or a church or something, even if you forget about the religious kind of context of it, just the feeling of that environment, there's something very particular about it. And I wonder that if somebody has told somebody that a place is haunted, then invariably people turn up with a sense of fear. And so if lots of people come here with a sense of fear, I wonder if that somehow starts to sort of influence and change the way it feels. And I think right now, you know, if you just think about the news cycle and the way in which fear is promoted in society, it's actually really difficult to be free from fear. It's almost as though media are constantly fanning the flames of fear. On the one hand, we're finding out things about things we didn't previously know about. We're getting more detail. That can be useful. That's the insight part of fear. That bit is really important. Shouldn't deny it. At the same time, I feel like 24-hour news cycle, if we are plugged into it 24/7, then we're just encouraging that sense of fear. So really important to recognize in our life, are the things that we can do, are the things that we can leave behind, are the things that we can change, so that we're not encouraging more fear than is necessary in our life. You know, one of the scariest moments when I look back over my life, and there's a few, but one of the was with the birth of my second son. And that whole environment is so stacked with feeling and emotion and intensity. And it always amazes me when people come out of childbirth and say, that was the most amazing thing in the world. And yeah, but it's also really scary, or it can be. And all I had to do was stand there and watch. It wasn't like I was the one who was having to kind of go through it. But there were some complications. And I can remember very clearly going from a point of being in a sort of a sense of awe and a sense of wonder to very quickly just feeling in the room the palpable sense of discomfort and fear from the medical staff. And then before I knew it, there were twice as many medical staff in the room. And, you know, and things sort of got complicated very, very quickly. And I remember in that situation, I was really, really overwhelmed by fear, I would say. And a big part of that was having no control over the situation, a feeling of being completely helpless in that environment. And initially, I would say it was a deeply uncomfortable feeling. The only difference is, unlike other areas of life, in that situation, I didn't have the opportunity to distract myself. There was nowhere to go. There's nothing else I could do at the time. I couldn't run away from it. And those, I think, are the moments actually that are really, really precious and really valuable, where we're almost forced into a situation where we can't outrun fear, where we can't get away from it, and we have to be present with it. And what I found was that, yeah, it continued to be scary, but allowing that sense of uncertainty to be present and not fighting it, it started to dissipate. It started to feel different in some way. The fear wasn't so scary. The fear was as it was. And again, I'm not suggesting for a minute that I was somehow just able to sort of let go of it. This was someone I loved someone who I loved and do love very much. It was the birth of our son. But there was definitely a change in the relationship to fear. When I remember really clearly, to begin with, my initial reaction was actually to fight it, to push against it. And I felt so full of emotion. I remember kind of tears coming into my eyes. And that was the sort of the panic response. It was almost as though I'd met fear with so much resistance that it created this sort of sense, this building sense of emotion inside of me. So much so that I didn't kind of know what to do with it. But as soon as I stepped out of the way, as soon as I stopped kind of thinking about what might happen and what could happen, that disappeared. There was no tension to fight the fear. So there was just fear. And in many ways, that comes back to the very heart of all meditation teaching, actually. There's a really nice Zen saying. And again, forget about any sort of religious sort of context to this. But in Zen meditation, they talk about, sitting and experiencing different emotions. And it doesn't matter whether we're happy Buddha, sad Buddha, angry Buddha, fearful Buddha. The point is, everything is equally relevant. Everything is equally valuable. In our mind, we tend to split out the things that we like, the emotions that we like, rather than simply creating an environment where we can witness life unfolding. But that's the value. Because if we're always running away from it, or if we're always getting lost in it, then we will never, ever have the chance to understand it, to be at ease with it.